much, Lisa. And it's quite interesting to listen to the co-panelists in this extremely important issue that all of us are trying to do whatever they can to make sure that at least the carnage in Gaza and the Zionist entity Israel is brought accountable. I am not just a political activist, but I also, my organization and my political party, the Communist Party of Kenya, is one of the founding members of Kenya-Palestine Solidarity Movement here in Kenya. And we see a lot of similarities between our struggle during the national liberation struggle for independence and what the heroic brothers and sisters in Palestine are undergoing through. We can look at it in several ways when it comes to the question of Palestine. But it is important for us to understand what is it that it's sustaining the continuous or the ongoing genocide that has been with the Palestinian people since the establishment of Israel, which we consider as a Zionist entity still within the West of Asia. Because without United States imperialism, the colonial project called Israel will fall on its own weight because it gets life and support, both materially, morally, and even through veto power in the United Nations by a total support of the United States dominance class. So that means for us to advance the Palestinian question, we must also combine it with its mother, the one that gives it life, which is actually United States imperialism. If we don't do that, then we can only continue to plead with the Zionist entity to stop the carnage, but they won't. If it is about the United Nations and the international law, they are aware that the United States hegemony in those institutions will have a veto power and help them to carry on their carnage against the Palestinian people. This is important for us to understand, because the lie that the Zionist entity has sold us is that they went into Gaza as a counter-terrorist measure, that they went to they were targeting Hamas. But it's important also to understand that Hamas was not there when Palestine was actually, being brutalized since the institutionalization of Israel in 1948. Hamas and the entire resistant axis emerged because of the repression and the settler-colonial project. So without the settler-colonial project, Israel, the entire resistant axis, including Hamas, will not have come to be. So it is also important to understand that if indeed we were able to negotiate with the oppressor to make sure that the oppressor can actually give leeway, then there was no need for resistance. But remember, the Palestinian Authority has been trying to negotiate and talk to the United States and the Zionist entity called Israel to accept a two-state solution. But what they have actually experienced is deaths and more deaths. So it only confirms that we learn from history that the only way out is through resistance. And the Zionist entity will fall with its declining, supporter, which is the United States hegemony. Because in our own correct analysis, we say that the United States empire is also a declining empire. And they have an outpost called Israel that continues to cause pain in the West of Asia. And the European political class do not have, in fact, they behave like neocolonial projects. For example, the British politicians, the French politicians They do not control their own politics because they operate under the dictates of the United States of America, under the United States of the United States ruling class. So indeed, if we had to come out more forcefully and talk about forced displacement, forced displacement is not an afterthought. It is actually a deliberate and intentional policy by the Butcher Netanyahu regime to make sure that they can continue with their expansioning policy to steal land from Gaza, to steal land from Ramallah, to steal land from Bethlehem, and even southern Lebanon. So to try and think that the Zionist entity went into Gaza only to liquidate Hamas, they have been carpet bombing Gaza. But that has not been the only place they have been bombing. They have also been at least bombing Ramallah. They have at least been bombing Bethlehem and other places that are not under the entity called Hamas. So the only thing that the Zionist entity want to actually further is an ultimate agenda of land dispossession and to make sure that they can entrench settler colonialism. Because remember, this settler colonialism experiment, we learned it from the United States that were able to liquidate the entire indigenous community and make sure that they establish their hegemony in the Northern America. What about in Australia? The Aborigines were almost decimated and replaced. What the Zionist entity Israel is not aware is that times have changed and they cannot pretend that they can be able to atomize and kill Palestinian people en masse only to build settlement on top of babies' graves. That is important for us. In terms of international law and the effect of the International Court of the Criminal Court, that is ICC, also we have to remember that ICC as an imperialist court only is given the powers and the teeth to bite when they are acting in the interest of the United States ruling class. Otherwise, ICC is toothless in the sense. They can give pronunciations, but at the very end of it, they don't have a standing army to enforce those. They do not have an organized force of violence, and they rely on Interpol and other organizations that are dictated by the United States imperialism to effect even their processes. So it's limited in the sense that even after the ICJ ruling, and several people have gone to ICC court, how is it possible that we have not gotten the Israeli political leaders held accountable in the international law? Every time we see that there is a motion on the floor of the United Nations to stop this genocide, the United States puts a black face to actually veto this particular motion. So it basically means that we cannot isolate our solidarity with Palestinian people and the defeat of the primary enemy of the peaceful coexistence in this world, which is United States imperialism. If you look at the targeting of civilians, it's not just targeting of civilians that the Netanyahu regime does. He even kills, health workers. He even kills, volunteers that are distributing food. He does collective punishment by making sure that the food does not reach the most vulnerable. Medicine does not reach the most vulnerable. So anybody who thinks anywhere in the world that they can be complicit about the ongoing genocide in Gaza and think they are safe, they are not safe at all. Because remember, the Zionist entity will escalate the war. Now, when they escalate the war and try to confront the Iranian and the Iranian resistant axis, then what will happen is that the Iranian, the DPRK, and Russia and China has already have a security pact. So it basically means that the weakest point in imperialism is in Gaza. And if we don't stop the ongoing war in Gaza, then we must be prepared to pay a heavy price indeed, by making sure that once there is the World War III breaks out and it is irreversible, then nobody will be safe, especially
we have 20 seconds left. Thank you.
Yeah, especially when the Zionist entity continues to carry out their war games and their experiment. Now, on the international community, I just wanted to say one more word, that the international community is blameless as long as the United States is the prefect, is the world police and dictates everything within the international community. There will be no much except to support not just international solidarity with the Palestinian people, but also make sure that we can support the ongoing resistance. Thank you very much.